My sister stole my entire inheritance, but she had no idea that Dad had written a second letter before he died. Before I tell you what was inside it, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Because sometimes, the truth appears only after someone believes they have already won. My name is Lena Hartman. I was 34 years old and living in Leipzig when my father, Martin Hartman, was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Dad had spent more than 30 years building a small transportation company from nothing. He was not a millionaire, but he owned a comfortable family home, a warehouse outside the city, several delivery vehicles, and enough savings to live without worrying about money. My older sister, Katharina, had always been his favorite. At least, that was what I believed. Katharina was confident, charming, and able to make people trust her within minutes. She worked as a real estate agent, wore expensive clothes, drove a luxury car, and constantly talked about her successful career. I was the quiet one. I worked as an accountant, rented a small apartment, and avoided arguments whenever possible. While Katharina loved attention, I preferred stability. After Dad became ill, I visited him almost every evening after work. I cooked his meals, cleaned the house, collected his medication, and drove him to hospital appointments. Katharina usually appeared on Sundays carrying flowers and expensive pastries. She would stay for an hour, take a few photographs with Dad, and leave before it was time to wash the dishes. Still, Dad often defended her. "Katharina has a demanding job," he told me one evening. I placed a bowl of soup in front of him. "So do I." He looked at me with tired eyes. "I know, Lena, and I appreciate everything you do." But appreciation was not the same as love. At least, that was how it felt whenever Katharina entered the room and his face immediately brightened. Then, one evening, I discovered something that changed the way I saw my sister. I arrived at Dad's house earlier than usual and heard Katharina speaking on the phone in the kitchen. "I just need a few more months," she whispered. "Once everything with my father is settled, I can repay all of it." I stopped in the hallway. There was a long silence. "No, he hasn't changed his mind," she continued. "I made sure of that." I stepped into the kitchen. Katharina immediately ended the call. "What did you hear?" she demanded. "Enough." Her face tightened. It was a private conversation. "You were talking about Dad's money." She picked up her handbag. "You don't know what you're talking about. You're waiting for him to die so you can pay your debts." She moved closer and lowered her voice. "You should be careful, Lena. You have no idea what Dad and I discussed." Then she walked out. I wanted to tell Dad what I had heard, but when I entered his bedroom, he looked weaker than ever. He was lying beneath a gray blanket, staring through the window at the garden. I sat beside him and held his hand. "Dad, did Katharina ask you for money?" His fingers tightened around mine. "Why are you asking?" "I heard her talking to someone. She said everything would be settled after you." I could not finish the sentence. Dad closed his eyes. "Not everything is what it appears to be." "What does that mean?" He turned his head toward me. "Promise me you won't lose faith in yourself." My stomach tightened. "Why are you saying that?" He tried to answer, but suddenly began coughing. His entire body shook as I reached for his water. When the coughing stopped, he looked exhausted. "We'll talk tomorrow," he whispered. But tomorrow never came. Dad was taken to the hospital that night. 3 weeks later, he died. The funeral took place beneath a dark sky. Rain fell throughout the ceremony, soaking the flowers placed beside his grave. Katharina stood next to me dressed in black. She cried loudly while I remained silent, unable to accept that Dad was really gone. After the burial, she wrapped her arms around me. "Now we only have each other," she whispered. I believed her. 10 days later, we sat inside the office of Dad's lawyer, Mr. Schneider. A dark blue folder rested on the desk. Mr. Schneider adjusted his glasses and began reading the will. The family home went to Katharina. The warehouse went to Katharina. Dad's transportation company, vehicles, savings, and investments also went to Katharina. I received €5,000. For several seconds, I thought I had misunderstood. "I'm sorry," I said. "Can you read that again?" Mr. Schneider looked uncomfortable. "The instructions are very clear." "That's impossible." Katharina placed a hand on my arm. "Please don't make a scene." I pulled away from her. "I took care of Dad every day." She stared at me coldly. "Caregiving does not automatically make you an heir." I turned toward the lawyer. "When was this will signed?" 8 months ago." "Can I see it?" He handed me a copy. Dad's signature was at the bottom. It looked real, but something about it felt wrong. The letters were slightly uneven, as though his hand had been trembling. Katharina stood up and smoothed her coat. "I'm selling the company," she announced, "and probably the house as well. You can't sell everything Dad built. It belongs to me now." That was when I understood her phone call. She had not simply expected an inheritance. She had been depending on it. Over the next few days, Katharina ignored my calls. When I visited Dad's house, my key no longer worked. She had changed the locks. Through the window, I saw strangers carrying boxes and furniture outside. I knocked until Katharina opened the door. "You're not allowed to come here without permission," she said. This was my home too. "Not anymore. I only want some of Dad's personal belongings. There's nothing here that belongs to you." Then she closed the door in my face. I stood in the rain and watched 2 workers carry Dad's old wooden desk toward a van. He had kept that desk locked for as long as I could remember. Suddenly, I remembered the final favor he had asked of me. 2 days before he entered the hospital, Dad had given me his old wristwatch and asked me to take it to a repair shop. The watchmaker had called after the funeral, but I had completely forgotten to collect it. The next morning, I went to the small shop. The elderly watchmaker recognized me immediately. "I'm sorry about your father," he said. "Thank you, I came for his watch." He placed it carefully on the counter, but did not release it. "Your father visited me personally several months ago." "That can't be right. He was already very sick." "He said it was important." The watchmaker turned the watch over and opened the back casing with a tiny metal tool. Inside was a tightly folded piece of paper. My hands began trembling as I opened it. Dad had written only one sentence. "Lena, the first letter was not my last. Look in the place Katharina would never enter willingly." I read the words 3 times. Then I realized exactly where Dad wanted me to go. The place was the basement beneath Dad's warehouse. Katharina had hated it since we were children. The building was old, cold, and always smelled of oil, dust, and damp concrete. When we were teenagers, Dad once asked us to help him clean the storage rooms. Katharina had lasted less than 10 minutes before complaining about spiders and refusing to go downstairs again. I drove there immediately. The front gate was locked, but I still had the small brass key Dad had once given me for emergencies. Katharina had changed the locks at the house, but apparently she had forgotten about the warehouse. Inside, the building was almost empty. Most of the delivery vehicles were gone. Bright rectangles on the dusty floor showed where shelves and equipment had already been removed. Katharina was selling everything quickly. I found the basement door behind the old staff kitchen and switched on my phone's flashlight. The stairs creaked beneath my feet. At the bottom, I saw metal cabinets, broken chairs, and boxes filled with old company records. I searched for nearly an hour. Then I noticed something strange. One filing cabinet stood several centimeters away from the wall. When I pulled it forward, I found a small steel box hidden behind it. The brass key opened that too. Inside was a sealed envelope with my name written across the front. There was also a USB drive and a business card belonging to a lawyer named Dr. Miriam Vogt. My hands shook as I opened the envelope. "Dear Lena," the letter began. "If you are reading this, then Katharina has presented the first will." I stopped breathing. Dad had known exactly what would happen. He explained that 8 months earlier, Katharina had come to him in tears. Her real estate business was failing, and she owed nearly 200,000 euros after making several reckless investments. She begged him to transfer the house and company into her name. When he refused, her behavior changed. She began controlling his appointments, collecting his mail, and convincing him that I was only helping because I expected money. Dad did not believe her at first. Then Katharina showed him printed messages that appeared to come from me. In them, I supposedly complained about caring for him and said I deserved the house. I had never written those messages. Dad eventually discovered they were fake when he found one of my real messages on his old phone and compared the dates. By then, however, Katharina had already taken him to a different lawyer and pressured him into signing a new will. The signature was real, but Dad wrote that he had been heavily medicated, confused, and afraid that Katharina would abandon him if he refused. My eyes filled with tears as I continued reading. "I made a mistake," he wrote. "I allowed guilt and fear to control me, but I corrected it." 2 months before his death, Dad had signed a second will with Dr. Miriam Vogt. That will divided the estate equally between us, but it included one important condition. Katharina would lose her share if it could be proven that she had forged documents, hidden company assets, or attempted to manipulate the inheritance process. The USB drive contained copies of bank transfers, recordings of conversations, medical reports, and photographs of documents Dad had found in Katharina's handbag. At the end of the letter, Dad wrote, "Do not fight her with anger, fight her with the truth." I called Dr. Vogt immediately. She answered after the third ring. When I told her my name, she became silent. "I've been waiting for your call," she said. That afternoon, I sat in her office while she examined the letter and USB drive. "The second will is valid," she said. "I witnessed your father sign it with another independent witness." "Then, why did Mr. Schneider read the first one?" "Because your father instructed me not to reveal the second will unless you found his letter." I stared at her. Why would he do that? He believed Katharina was monitoring his mail and phone calls. He wanted to make sure the evidence reached you safely. Dr. Vogt connected the USB drive to her computer. The first recording was Dad's voice. Katharina was speaking in the background. "You already signed it," she said. "If you change anything now, everyone will think you're mentally unfit." "I want both my daughters treated fairly," Dad answered. "You owe me more than you owe Lena." Then came a loud sound, as if something had been thrown across the room. I covered my mouth. There were 4 more recordings. In one of them, Katharina admitted creating the fake messages. In another, she threatened to stop visiting Dad unless he left her the company. Dr. Vogt leaned back in her chair. "This is serious evidence of coercion and fraud. So we can stop the sale. We can apply for an emergency court order, but we must move quickly." She contacted the court that same day. By the following morning, a temporary order had been issued preventing Katharina from selling the house, warehouse, company, or remaining assets until the dispute was resolved. For the first time since Dad's death, I felt hope. Then Katharina called me. Her voice was trembling with rage. "What have you done?" I found Dad's second letter. There was a long silence. "You broke into my property. The warehouse is part of a disputed estate. You have no idea what you're getting involved in. I know about the fake messages, I know about your debts, and I heard the recordings." Her breathing became heavy. Dad was confused. "None of that will hold up." "Then explain it to the judge." She laughed quietly. "You still think this is about the inheritance?" My grip tightened around the phone. "What are you talking about?" "The company was nearly bankrupt before Dad died. There is nothing left for you to inherit. That's not what the records show. You haven't seen the real records. Then she ended the call. That evening, Dr. Vogt received an email from Katharina's attorney. Attached was a document claiming Dad had secretly borrowed more than 600,000 euros against the company and warehouse. If the document was genuine, the entire estate was buried in debt. But when Dr. Vogt enlarged the signature, she noticed something. The loan agreement was dated 3 weeks after Dad had entered the hospital. And according to his medical records, he had been unconscious that entire day. Someone had signed his name while he was dying. The next morning, Dr. Vogt arranged a meeting with the bank. But before we could leave her office, my phone rang. It was the warehouse security company. "There has been a fire," the man said. "The basement is completely destroyed." For a moment, I could not speak. Then he added one final sentence. "The police believe it was started deliberately." By the time Dr. Vogt and I reached the warehouse, firefighters were still spraying water through the broken basement windows. Smoke rolled from the building, turning the morning sky gray. A police officer stopped us near the entrance. "You cannot go inside," he said. "The structure is unstable." I stared at the blackened doorway. Dad's letter had been found there. The company records had been stored there. Every piece of evidence Katharina feared had been inside that basement. "She did this," I whispered. Dr. Vogt looked at me sharply. "We cannot accuse anyone without proof." But she knew I found the evidence. "Yes," she replied, "and that may be exactly what helps us prove it." The police questioned me for nearly 2 hours. I told them about the inheritance dispute, the threatening phone call, and the forged loan agreement. When I mentioned the security cameras, the officer frowned. The main system was damaged in the fire. My heart sank. Then a security employee approached us. "The cameras upload recordings to an external server," he said. "The fire destroyed the equipment, but not the stored footage." For the first time that morning, I saw Dr. Vogt smile. The footage showed a dark car arriving at the warehouse at 2:14 a.m. A person wearing a hood entered through the side door using a key. 23 minutes later, the same person ran out. The face was hidden, but the car was clearly visible. It belonged to Katharina. The police searched her apartment that afternoon. They found the coat from the recording in her washing machine. They also found a warehouse key, empty fuel containers in her garage, and printed copies of the forged loan agreement. But the biggest surprise was on her laptop. There were emails between Katharina and a bank employee named Tobias Kruger. Tobias had helped her create the false loan documents. In exchange, Katharina had promised him money from the sale of the warehouse. The 600,000 euro debt had never existed. It was designed to make me believe the estate was worthless, so I would stop fighting. Katharina was arrested that evening. I thought I would feel satisfied when I heard the news. Instead, I sat alone in my apartment and cried. She was still my sister. We had shared birthdays, Christmas mornings, childhood secrets, and the same father. Somewhere along the way, greed had turned her into someone I barely recognized. 3 weeks later, the inheritance case went before the court. Katharina entered with her lawyer and avoided looking at me. She had been released while the criminal investigation continued, but she looked completely different. Her expensive clothes were gone. Her hair was tied back, and dark circles surrounded her eyes. Dr. Vogt presented the second will. She showed the court the medical reports, Dad's recordings, the fake messages, and the evidence from Katharina's laptop. A handwriting expert confirmed that Dad had signed the second will while fully aware of what he was doing. Another expert confirmed that the loan agreement had been forged. Then Katharina's lawyer stood. He argued that Dad had been emotionally unstable and that I had manipulated him during his illness. Katharina finally looked at me. Her expression was not ashamed. It was angry. "You always wanted to take him away from me," she said. I stared at her. I took care of him. You made me look selfish. You did that yourself. Her face tightened. Then Dr. Vogt placed one final document on the table. I believe the court should see the last page of Mr. Hartman's letter, she said. I turned toward her. What last page? Dr. Vogt looked at me gently. Your father asked me to keep it confidential until the hearing. She began reading. Dad wrote that the second will did not divide the estate equally. Not anymore. After discovering Katharina's forged messages and attempts to control him, he had added a clause. Katharina would receive nothing if she challenged the will using false documents, concealed assets, or threatened either me or the estate. She had done all three. The house, warehouse, company, and remaining savings would now pass entirely to me. Katharina jumped from her chair. No, he would never do that. The judge ordered her to sit down. She turned toward me, her face red. You planned this. I didn't even know about the clause. You took everything. I stood slowly. No, Katharina, you lost everything because you couldn't accept half. The courtroom became silent. That was the moment I finally understood Dad's plan. He had not wanted revenge. He had given Katharina one final chance to tell the truth. If she had accepted the second will, she would have received half the estate. She could have paid part of her debts and rebuilt her life. But greed had pushed her to forge another document, destroy evidence, and set fire to Dad's warehouse. She had created her own punishment. The judge confirmed the second will and transferred control of the estate to me. Katharina was ordered to return the money she had already taken from the company. Months later, she pleaded guilty to fraud, document forgery, coercion, and arson. Because nobody had been injured and she cooperated after the evidence was presented, she received a prison sentence followed by several years of financial supervision. Tobias also lost his job and faced criminal charges. I decided not to sell Dad's company. Instead, I hired an experienced manager and kept most of the employees who had worked with him for years. The warehouse was repaired, but I asked the builders to preserve one blackened brick from the basement wall. I placed it on the shelf in Dad's old office beside his wristwatch. One afternoon, Dr. Vogt visited me and handed me a final envelope. This one contained no secrets or legal documents. It was simply a note from Dad. Lena, I am sorry I allowed you to believe you mattered less. You were never second in my heart. You were the person I trusted to do what was right when I was no longer there. I pressed the letter against my chest and closed my eyes. For years, I had believed Katharina was his favorite. But Dad's final gift was not the house, the company, or the money. It was the truth. And sometimes, the truth is the only inheritance that can repair what betrayal has broken. Tell me in the comments, would you have forgiven Katharina after everything she did? If you enjoyed this story, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more emotional stories about betrayal, justice, and smart revenge.